Good morning, students of class 5. Welcome to English class. Today we are going to learn about kinds of clauses. This is chapter 18 of your grammar book. You will find this at page number 70. You already know what is a clause. Still, once more, let us know what is a clause. A clause is a group of words that contains at least one subject and one finite verb, which has a meaning of its own. That means we can use this clause as a sentence or as a part of a sentence. Now, when a clause has complete meaning of its own, it can be used as a sentence. But when it has incomplete meaning, it is used as a part of sentence. Let us take some examples of it. Like, he is a news reporter. Now, in this sentence, there is a subject, he, and there is a verb, is. And this clause have a complete meaning. He is a news reporter. So, this clause or this group of words has a complete meaning of its own. That's why this clause is a sentence. Again, where he stays. In this group of words, we are having a subject, he. We are having a verb, stays. But the meaning is not complete. Where he stays. It is incomplete meaning. That's why it is a part of a sentence. Now, depending upon this, we can say clauses are of two types. Independent clause, the one which has complete meaning of its own, and dependent clause. That is, it depends on something else to form its meaning. Now, independent clause is also known as main clause or principal clause, and dependent clause is also known as subclause. Now, what is independent clause? An independent clause has a subject and a verb and can stand alone as a sentence. That means it has a complete meaning of its own. So, whenever a group of words which has a subject and a verb stands alone or has a complete meaning of its own, or we can say it makes complete sense, such clause is called a principal or main clause. Say, for example, they work in marketing department. Here we are having a subject, they. We are having verb, work. And this group of words is giving us a complete meaning. That's why it is independent clause. It does not depend on anything else to form its meaning. That's why it is independent clause. Now, what is dependent clause? Dependent clause has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand alone as a sentence. It depends on another half of the sentence, that is a principal clause or a main clause. So, what is a dependent clause? A dependent clause is that kind of clause which has a subject and it has a verb, but it cannot stand alone. To complete its meaning, it is dependent on the other half of the whole sentence, which is usually a principal or main clause. Now, let us take an example. This is the girl who danced really well on stage. Now, this portion, who danced really well on the stage, cannot stand alone. It depends on the first portion, the first half. This is the girl. This is the girl is the main clause because it has a complete meaning of its own. As the second half, who danced really well on stage, depends on the first half for its meaning, the second half is known as dependent clause. Now let us do some exercise. This is exercise 1, which you will get at page number 71. So in this exercise you have to say whether the highlighted or underlined portion is dependent clause or independent clause. Number 1 is done in your book itself. So here we are having number 2 first. I noticed the boy's hands which were resting on the handlebar. I noticed on the boy's hand. So this is having a complete meaning of its own. It has a subject I, it has a verb noticed, and it does not depend on any other portion of the sentence for its meaning. So that's why it is independent clause. The doorbell rang as soon as I entered the house. So as soon as I entered the house, in this part we are having I as the subject, entered as the verb. But as soon as I entered the house does not make a complete sense, and it depends on the first half, the doorbell rang, for its complete meaning. That's why it is dependent clause. Next, the woman who lives next door is my aunt. The woman is my aunt. This portion makes a complete meaning. That's why it is independent clause. Now, we will learn about two types of dependent clause. The first one is adjectival clause. Now, what is adjectival clause? This group of words that does the work of an adjective is known as adjectival clause. So this is usually the subordinate clause or the dependent clause which works as an adjective. It can be used like an adjective to describe a person or thing. It often begins with words like who, which, that, whose. Like say for example, the man who is standing over there is a product development manager. So this portion, who is standing over there, is describing the noun man. That's why this portion is adjectival clause. So adjectival clause always describes a noun in a sentence. Now, adverbial clause. Again, an adverbial clause does the work of an adverb. That is, it describes or it adds meaning to a verb, an adjective, or another adverb in a sentence. It tells us when, where, how, why, to what extent, or under what conditions a work is done. It often begins with when, until, after, where, because, since, while, if, or as. Say for example, there will be some promotion when the new product are available. So when the new product are available is giving a condition of the work, that is promotion. So this is adverbial clause. Now let us do some exercise. This is exercise 3 of your book. You will find this in page number 72. Over here, first you have to underline the dependent clause and then you have to state whether it is adjectival clause or adverbial clause. Number 1 is done in your book. So over here, number 2. My younger sister had grown very tall since you visited us last. So, this portion, since you visited us last, is the dependent clause and it is indicating a time which is the work of an adverb. That's why it is adverbial clause. When the work happened is the work of an adverb. That's why it is adverbial clause. Next, she is the woman whom I met in Mumbai last Wednesday. She is the woman is a independent clause because it does not depend on anything else for its meaning. But whom I met in Mumbai last Wednesday is dependent clause and it depends on the first half of the sentence. And that's why this is the dependent clause and it describes this total portion. This clause describes the noun woman in this sentence. That's why it is adjectival clause. Now exercise 4. In exercise 4 you have to underline adjectival clause and say which noun they describe in the sentence. So this is number 2. We met a tourist who is from Australia. So the adjectival clause is who is from Australia and which noun is being described over here? Tourist. So in the given blank you have to write that noun. I like people who help others. Who help others is the adjectival clause. And this adjectival clause describe the noun people. Now this is exercise 5. Over here you have to underline the adverbial clause and then circle the verb in the main clause about which the adverbial clause add information. She met her old teacher while she was traveling to Kanpur. So the dependent clause over here is while she was traveling to Kanpur. This is adverbial clause and it adds meaning to the verb met. So you have to underline this verb, circle this verb, Next, you must keep trying until you succeed. Until you succeed is the adverbial clause and it adds information to the verb must keep trying. So you have to circle it. Now, these are the homework that you have to complete. Exercise 1, the remaining portion, exercise 2, exercise 3, 4, 5, remaining portion and exercise 6. And then you have to submit the completed work through email by Tuesday. Thank you.